Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the third episode of the Untold Hypothesis, brought to you by the Department of Life Sciences, Kristu Jayanti University. Today we are commemorating World Alzheimer's Day with the theme, Let's Not Forget Those Who Forget. And today we have with us an eminent guest, Dr. Phalguni A., Senior Scientific Officer from the National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
So, ma'am, I think the last time you were here, it was Kristu Jayanti College, right? And now it's Kristu Jayanti University. So how does it feel to be back here?
It's amazing because there's a transformation, there's growth, and wherever there's growth, there's happiness. Growth happens because of happiness. So I feel good about it.
So, ma'am, coming to Alzheimer's, for our viewers, could you just tell us what Alzheimer's is and what exactly goes on talking with respect to the brain? So what happens?
Yeah, thank you. So Alzheimer's disease is classified to be a disease of the elderly. So whenever we talk about neurodegenerative disorders, these are basically disorders which affect the neurons within the brain. So what does an effect mean? Effect means that either they become less functional or some of the neurons die. So the neurodegeneration could be because they are less functional or because they die, and in the effect it affects that particular function which is controlled by that region of the brain. So say in Alzheimer's disease, it's the cortex or the cortices which are affected in a patient. Cortices or cortex, cerebral cortex as is generally or popularly called as, is associated with higher order mental functions, and it's very much tuned or better tuned in human beings compared to even say chimpanzees. The expression of an individual, languages, behavior, functions that we do, higher order functions that we perform are all endowed to these cortices. And within the cortex are the primary neurons, the principal neurons which release this particular neurotransmitter called the acetylcholine. So those specific set of neurons which release or synthesize and then release this neurotransmitter are targeted, are affected. They are either dysfunctional or they are lost. That results in dementia, inability to perform certain executive functions, and that eventually develops into a full-blown Alzheimer's disease.
So, ma'am, what exactly is the reason that this kind of degeneration happens? Like, what is the change that you can observe in the brain?
Okay, so if we talk about neurodegeneration, let's take it as a classical, not only about Alzheimer's, but when we talk about neurodegeneration, there are certain sets of neurons which are more susceptible to the neurotoxic changes that occur in the milieu, and these are supposed to be the bold and the beautiful neurons. Why are they called bold and beautiful? They are beautiful because they are large, they have large processes, their axons run from the brain to almost to the toe. So these neurons have a very large arborization which increases the surface area. If we talk about the rule of physics, since the surface area is larger, it is more receptive to the neurotoxic insults that can go on within the brain. So that is one of the reasons why. And since they are involved in several very important processes, say if we talk about the cortical neurons, they are involved in thinking, and we are constantly doing those activities as a human being during the day, even during the night. I think we have very little rest to the brain. So during these activities, certain toxins are generated as a byproduct of the process itself, and they could go on to target these neurons. So these could be endotoxins, or an individual gets exposed to certain toxins from the periphery. It could be through the blood that is flowing through the brain. So these set of neurons, say in Parkinson's disease, you are aware that the dopamine synthesizing dopaminergic neurons are affected. in amyotrophic lateral sclerosis is the spinal motor neurons are affected. All these neurons have larger cell bodies and they have a larger reach throughout the bodies because they control several important aspects of human behavior.
Yes, ma'am. So, two important proteins that I would like to emphasize on here are respectively, the amyloid beta and the tau proteins. So, under the normal homeostatic conditions, what are their roles and what is the change observed when a person is suffering from Alzheimer's?
Okay, let's take tau first. So, I was talking about these large neurons, right? So, for the neurons to remain functional and to reach, they have a larger arborization. Now, the structural component are known as, there are different types of structural components which make the neuron, and particularly the arborization. You have the neurofilaments, you have the intermediate filaments, and tau is a component of the filaments. So, under normal condition, it is supposed to give the flexibility as well as the strength to that entire structure. Beta amyloid has another function, and basically it is during a toxic insult, say the processes are affected, and these components, they just spill over into the niche area. Now, what happens is when it gets spilled over or it starts building up, say we talk about amyloid plaques which are present just outside the cell body. When they start building up, the microglia get activated. Microglia are the surveillance cells. They are kind of the police system of the nervous system. So, they come and scavenge these debris. When the debris becomes larger than the number of microglia which have been recruited, when the debris becomes beyond their capacity to be cleared, that is when the neurodegenerative signals begin to worsen. Then it enters into a vicious cycle where the it's basically the debris causes another a larger impounding or compounding effect on another set of neurons. So, one neuron dying causes an effect on another neuron, and so on. The microglia get recruited, the astrocytes get recruited, and then it becomes a scene of anarchy. That is called neurodegeneration within the.
Okay, ma'am. So, from what you said this tau protein is basically a structural protein, right?
Yes.
So, from a from a point of comparison between a person who is not having Alzheimer's and one who's having Alzheimer's, if we were to do an histological study, would you say that the person having Alzheimer's would have an even more rigid brain tissue than normal persons? Is that how we can infer that?
Rigid, yes. Rigid, I would rather take it in another context, because it would be the Alzheimer's tissue is more friable, more fragile, because the neurons have died. It does not have enough number of neurons to now function to carry on that process, right. So, yeah, it becomes more fragile, it becomes more susceptible to further toxic insults.
So, what I can get from this is that dementia is like the beginning stage, which later on progresses to other incapabilities, which include locomotive coordination and all of this. Would that be right?
Wherever a cognitive input is required, those functions would definitely be involved, would be affected. See, I have to walk from this chair and go to the door. That needs execution, planning, and judgment of certain aspects. Say I have to step down. So, all these activities, although they need cognitive inputs, it cannot be a simply motor activity.
Yes.
So, wherever a cognitive input is required, it will all be affected.
Okay. And coming towards the treatment, so what are the popular approved drugs for Alzheimer's right now?
Yeah, so the newer drugs are monoclonal antibodies.
Okay.
These are basically involved in scavenging the beta amyloid debris which has been collected within the brain, the plaques, they clear the plaques, and it takes around 15 to 20 months for an effect to be really visible. So monoclonal antibodies are amongst the latest therapeutic modalities available to Alzheimer's disease patients, and others are, like as I talked about acetylcholine, and we talked about the enzyme which is responsible for its breakdown, acetylcholine esterase. So there are acetylcholine esterase inhibitors which are also used to control the symptoms.
Okay. But again, one of the challenges would be, we are aware that there's a blood-brain barrier.
Yes.
And when monoclonal antibodies are like administered, they are usually intravenous, or they are given that way, right? So is there a challenge or limitation?
I think that has already been overcome, and it is these monoclonal antibodies are known to pass through the blood-brain barrier.
Okay. And what are the lifestyle changes that one could have, either to prevent or to manage the symptoms?
Yeah, so I think the most important adage that it goes is prevention is better than cure.
True.
Right. So of course, we do not have it in our hands. We don't know whether we are expressing that gene or not. So if we are not aware, we can use certain modalities which can, help us stall that particular process of. So if you realize that you are forgetting, if a senior individual is forgetting more frequently, maybe one could make changes to the routine. Say, if you have a sedentary lifestyle, make it a point to get up from your chair every 1 hour, go walk around, drink water, do exercises, make exercises, or rather incorporate exercises into your daily routine. A 40 minutes exercise, can go a very long way in controlling or progression of the Alzheimer's disease. Say maybe if you are in the if the patient is in early stages, say mild cognitive impairment or something, it's possible to even revert it from that stage. So those things, and yeah, that's what I can suggest immediately.
And for our viewers, could you just tell us what biomarkers are, and what are the biomarkers that you would look for in the case of Alzheimer's?
Yeah. So biomarkers, as they say, is, it's basically, it could be an entity which can help us track the progression of the disease. However, the first most important attribute of a biomarker is that it should be present in normal physiological activity. Okay. So there are several aspects which are considered as biomarker. Even an imaging modality could be, it could be the radio images which are available from a brain can be considered as a biomarker. In laboratory language, biomarker is any protein which is present or absent. So as I mentioned, biomarkers have to be present at a physiological level. However, when the disease sets in, these physiological levels are altered. So the alteration could result in increase in the levels or a decrease in the levels, which could be related to the effect on the genes which are transcribed to these proteins. So normally when we talk about a biomarker, it is a protein biofluid based biomarker. It is generally either a protein or a nucleic acid. So if the protein has increased beyond a level, it will have a toxic effect on the brain function in that particular way. So it can be used as either CSF or blood in terms of serum, or CSF or serum or plasma can be used as body fluids, and you can detect the levels of that particular protein in these biofluids. Say in case of Alzheimer's disease, people have seen that the levels of beta amyloid tau are majorly affected in the patients who have Alzheimer's disease.
Okay, ma'am.
So they are reliable biomarkers, and they are considered for monitoring the progression of the disease as well. So with the increase in the difficulties that the patient suffers from, so the complexity of the disease increases, then the levels of biomarkers also increase.
So it's like directly proportional.
Yeah, it's directly proportional to the increase in the disease symptoms.
So there's something that I'm not very familiar with, and it's neuroinflammation. Right? So when I hear the word inflammation, there are few hallmark features of inflammation that include something like redness, temperature increase, and then there's pain and there's swelling. So these are such hallmark features. But when it comes to neurological tissue or brain tissue, do we observe these general hallmark features of inflammation in them as well?
Yes. So inflammation is supposed to have a trigger. Okay. So say suppose one of the neurons has died, right? So when the neuron dies, as I mentioned, the microglia and astrocytes are always present within the vicinity of the neuron. Even microglia are present. However, when the more number of neurons die, more number of astrocytes and microglia are recruited to that region. There is a systematic recruitment because of the release of certain pro-inflammatory cytokines. These are the molecules which are released by the dying neurons and the cells which are present in the niche. So these microglia would go and scavenge. To a certain extent, even the astrocytes do the scavenging. So they scavenge, that means they remove this debris of that particular neuron. The neuron, while dying, has spilled certain biochemicals within the niche. Now that also causes a triggering effect to the neighboring neurons. So one neuron dying in the initial phase may not be so harmful to the nervous system, but when more number of neurons die and gradually the number of neurons dying increase and in numbers, there is a quantitative increase in the number of neurons dying. In that case, the number of microglia and astrocytes recruited to that region also go on to increase. So the presence of these extra microglia and the astrocytes are a signal of neuroinflammation. That means that there are within the vicinity, again there is an increased load of cytokines, pro-inflammatory cytokines. So just as we see in the skin, or when there is a wound or something like that, the redness which you mentioned, I wouldn't say there is a redness that is present in the neurons, but these supporting cells, they migrate to that region initially to rescue the nervous system, but then it can trigger a vicious cycle as well.
Okay, ma'am. So I just want to know, like, what are some of the biggest challenges that caregivers face for patients struggling with Alzheimer's, and what resources are available for such caregivers and family members, those who are dealing with family members having Alzheimer's? So what kind of resources can they have and what is available for them?
Yeah, so the caregivers burnout is a major issue while taking for the caregivers in taking care of the Alzheimer's disease patient, because they appear to be not amenable to the efforts that they are making. So I think in cultural context they also consider it to guilt to be one of the factors. So I think it's very important to see, one is rosterize. If more number of caregivers are available within the family, then you can rosterize the care so that more number of individuals are involved and the person gets rest from his or her own duties, periodic rest and all that. And it's important to see counselors. Counseling is an important aspect of healing the caregiver himself.
Okay.
To reduce the psychological burden that they are carrying. So yeah, counseling is available even in societal contexts and also in therapeutic contexts.
Okay. So just another question, ma'am. So what's one thing that you wish everyone knew about this disease?
I wish everyone knows that this disease can affect anyone, whether you carry the genes responsible for it or not. Probably because of the stressors that are prevalent in the environment, I don't think we should feel or we should ever think that we are immune to Alzheimer's disease. And that's not only a sad part, but it should also trigger us to do more for Alzheimer's disease. For the patients, for the caregivers, for the doctors treating. As basic scientists, maybe we can really identify the factors which are important the biomarkers, effective modalities to measure biomarkers. Probably we can bring down the cost involved in managing an Alzheimer's disease patient. Any which way, I think we should contribute to Alzheimer's disease care. And I firmly believe that we should never think that it's not reaching us.
So our last question, ma'am. What is a simple action that our viewers can take to support the cause?
One is create awareness, spread the awareness through social media and effective modalities. On the social media, you have lot of information which is available, which may not always be true. So, I think screening the social media for the information available would be the first step towards creating awareness and spreading it. And in your neighborhood, probably you can engage with more number of people who are suffering from Alzheimer's disease or having dementia. Okay.
So that was really informative. Thank you so much. And
My
it was a
pleasure.
pleasure having you on the Untold Hypothesis. So ladies and gentlemen, with that we conclude our episode for today. Stay tuned to the Untold Hypothesis for more such content. Signing off, your host for today, Raymond.